Nate Diaz. Born in Stockton, California, Nate Diaz was raised in the gym by his older brother, Nick. He came into the UFC spotlight after winning The Ultimate Fighter Season 5 in 2007. Known for his volume striking and iron chin, Nate quietly built a resume, but it wasn't until UFC 196 that he truly exploded into mainstream fame. Stepping in on 11 days' notice, he submitted Conor McGregor via rear naked choke in the second round as the clear underdog. That night birthed a quote for the ages.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
His rematch with McGregor at UFC 202 became one of the highest-selling pay-per-views in UFC history, even beating the numbers of their previous fight, despite being a close majority decision loss. Diaz was vocal about fighter pay, marijuana use, and UFC politics. His authenticity turned him into a cult hero, especially after returning at UFC 241 to defeat Anthony Pettis after a 3-year layoff. Diaz didn't fight for titles. He fought for legacy. His fans followed him not for gold, but for grit. Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone, a former kickboxer and WEC veteran, Cerrone joined the UFC in 2011 and instantly became known for his activity and finishing ability. With wins over Benson Henderson, Jim Miller, and Edson Barboza, he became a contender for the lightweight championship. His head kick KO of Matt Brown and multiple Fight of the Night performances made him a fan staple. Cowboy fought for the title against Rafael dos Anjos at UFC on Fox 17, but lost quickly. Still, his willingness to fight anyone, anytime, kept him on big cards, including his headliner against Conor McGregor. Cerrone suffered several losses late in his career, but never turned down a fight even on short notice, and also jumping weight classes with ease. He retired at UFC 276, leaving his gloves in the octagon. Max Holloway. Max Holloway entered the UFC at just 20 years old. He fought a young Dustin Poirier in his debut and took several tough fights early, proving that the youngster was already an experienced combatant. After a setback against Conor McGregor in 2013, he went on a 13-fight win streak, winning the interim featherweight belt against Anthony Pettis and unifying the title by TKOing all-time great Jose Aldo at UFC 212. Holloway defended his title multiple times before losing to Alexander Volkanovski in a razor-thin decision at UFC 245. Despite back-to-back losses to Volk, fans rallied behind him for his humility and striking genius. He put on a boxing clinic against Calvin Kattar in 2021, famously yelling mid-fight while dodging punches. At UFC 300, the Hawaiian faced Justin Gaethje in one of the most spectacular fight nights ever seen. Max dominated Justin in the stand-up game for nearly 5 rounds before savagely meeting him in the middle of the ring. The following exchange was a risky move for Holloway, but ended in what many say is the best knockout of all time. This phenomenal finish earned Max the BMF and further sophisticated his popularity. Justin Gaethje, a 2-time NCAA Division I All-American wrestler, Gaethje made his name in WSOF before debuting in the UFC in 2017. In his UFC debut, the highlight engaged in a back-and-forth war with Michael Johnson, finishing him in the second round and earning Fight of the Year honors. Though he suffered losses to then-champion Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, Gaethje rebounded with spectacular knockouts of James Vick, Edson Barboza, and Donald Cerrone. He dismantled Tony Ferguson at UFC 249 to win the interim lightweight title. His fight with Khabib at UFC 254 ended in a second-round submission. Despite the loss, his sportsmanship and striking ability continued to draw admiration. In 2023, he knocked out Poirier with a head kick at UFC 291 to win the symbolic BMF title. Justin Gaethje lives and dies by the sword, often referred to as the most violent but also most entertaining UFC fighters, earning him a 100% performance bonus rate and the nickname we all know and love. Forrest Griffin. Forrest was a cop and a fighter when he joined The Ultimate Fighter Season 1. Nobody expected him to change the sport like he would later in his career. His finale bout with Stephan Bonnar in 2005 is often credited with saving the UFC. By scraping in PPV buys and ad revenue the fighting promotion desperately needed at the time. The legendary fight itself was a 3-round bloodbath, which drew in new fans and earned both men contracts. Griffin captured the light heavyweight title by defeating Quinton Rampage Jackson at UFC UFC 86. He defended against Rashad Evans but lost the belt, then suffered a tough KO to whom many consider the greatest fighter of all time, Anderson Silva. Due to injuries and age, he retired in 2013, but stayed with the UFC in executive and promotional roles. Forrest wasn't the most polished, he was the most relatable. Nick Diaz. The older Diaz brother made his name in the early UFC days, defeating Robbie Lawler in 2004, but it was in Strikeforce that he became a cult icon. As Strikeforce welterweight champ, he went on a tear with wins over Paul Daly and Frank Shamrock. His return to the UFC was massive, a controversial decision win over BJ Penn at UFC 137 and a no contest against Anderson Silva at UFC 183. Nick was suspended multiple times, including a notorious 5-year suspension for getting caught smoking marijuana, though luckily his unfair punishment later got reduced. Despite this, fans rallied for him as a symbol of resistance. He returned in 2021 to face Robbie Lawler again at UFC 266. Though he lost, the event felt more like a celebration than a comeback. Nick never cared about fame. He cared about fighting. And that's exactly why fans never stopped caring about him. Tony Ferguson. Tony El Cucuy Ferguson emerged from obscurity by winning the Ultimate Fighter 13 in 2011. Known for his full attack style, incredible stamina and pace, and unorthodox training, he built a reputation as the scariest fighter in the UFC during his prime. Between 2013 and 2019, Ferguson continued his legendary 12-fight win streak in the lightweight division, defeating names like Edson Barbosa, Rafael dos Anjos, Kevin Lee for the interim belt at UFC 216, and Donald Cerrone. The long-awaited showdown with Khabib Nurmagomedov was scheduled and canceled 5 separate times due to weight cut issues, freak accidents, and COVID. When the Khabib fight was finally off the table, Ferguson faced Justin Gaethje at UFC 249. Gaethje battered him in a brutal war, snapping Ferguson's streak. The loss marked the beginning of the Boogeyman's tragic decline, but his willingness to go out while appearing in the octagon and staying active despite many injuries and devastating losses, like at UFC 274 against Michael Chandler, only solidified his fan-favorite status. Tony never got his undisputed title shot, but to fans, his reign of chaos already made him a legend. Jorge Masvidal. A product of Miami's underground fighting scene, Jorge Masvidal rose through the ranks with stints in Strikeforce and Bellator. After years of being labeled a journeyman, he exploded in 2019. First came a knockout of Darren Till in London at UFC Fight Night 147. Then came the fastest KO in UFC history, a flying knee in 5 seconds against Ben Askren at UFC 239. He defeated Nate Diaz at UFC 244 to win the inaugural BMF title, with The Rock wrapping the belt around his waist. Despite high-profile losses to Kamaru Usman, including a brutal KO at UFC 261, Masvidal maintained his popularity with fans for his charisma and street justice persona. Masvidal's calm demeanor made him one of the most likable fighters in MMA. Who's your people's champion? Drop it in the comments, hit like if you felt the grit, and subscribe for more fight lore every week.